What's up, guys? Levi here. So, I just wanted to talk about a few things in relation to the paranormal, mainly going back to when I was a kid. So, when I was really young, like I'm talking like younger than 10 years old, I used to live in Leeds. And the house we lived in, for the most part, it was okay. There was like a couple of situations where, it'd been broken into, and then people were like, chucking bricks at the fucking window or whatnot. One of the things that happened quite a lot when I was a kid was that I used to have this recurring nightmare. And it was always the same things that happened, like it wasn't, this happened, but then this bit was a little bit different. It was literally the exact same nightmare that I was having every time. So it would always start with me getting ready to go out. I get ready, and then my parents would be outside waiting for me to come down the stairs. I would then start walking down the stairs, and then about halfway onto the staircase, my body would completely freeze. And then I would feel myself being pulled back up to the top of the stairs, and then being pulled into the bathroom, which was like directly at the top. I know that with dreams and that, it can be like a lot of variables. It could be coincidence, it could be due to, your feelings about something. It could just be, a completely random thing, which, again, could be coincidence. But for it to be the exact same dream to the point where I can recall it to this day, getting ready, top of the stairs, going down the stairs, my mum's in front of the door outside, and then my dad would be at the gate. I don't know where my brother was at this point though, but and then I would just freeze and then just get pulled up, and then it would always be when I got into the bathroom, which is when I'd wake up. It could be paranormal, it could not be paranormal, but it's just something that's very weird. I always felt a bit weird being in that bathroom for whatever reason. So it could very well have been that something, was attached to that particular room. Maybe somebody died in that room. I don't know. I've tried looking back at the history of the property that I lived at the time, but there isn't really much conclusive information about it. But yeah, then I used to get told stories by my mum about how, I like wake up randomly in the middle of the night, and I'd be looking into the corner of my room, and I'd be like screaming frantically. I remember one time as well, she told me about this one situation where I was sat in the kitchen at the little table, and I looked up into the corner above the back doorway, and again I was just screaming. Now, again, I tried to look into this, to see if there's like a reason people do this. Could it be like some sort of, fever dream if, I'm doing it, at night and waking up. But for me to be like sat at the little table in the kitchen, and then me to look into the corner and just start screaming randomly, something's not right there. Now, it was only in the last, maybe 10, 15 years that I started looking into things paranormal related. It was mainly to do with the fact that I was suffering with sleep paralysis an awful lot, and the fact that I'd seen things in sleep paralysis. So I had a look back on the history of the area that I lived in. Now, the area that I lived in at the time was Middleton. Supposedly, it does have a history in relation to the paranormal. There's a wooded area nearby which is said to be, really old and ancient. and there was like a lot of industrial related work that used to go on in that area before it became more residential. The two main things that I could find was there was this pub called the Old Boar's Head, and apparently it used to be an old burial ground. Or was it a druid ground? I think it was a druid ground, actually. But because of where it was situated, there's like a lot of ties to the paranormal in relation to that pub. There's also like this legend about this Middleton Railway ghost. So the Middleton Railway, it was built in the 1700s, and because of like how old it is, and I think it's still running to this day, there's a lot of paranormal stories and like lore attached to that railway. So the main one that I could find was about this ghost called David Brooke, who was struck by a train during this blizzard back in the 1800s. And it's said that to this day he's still roaming around the area. But it has been said as well by people that have been in the area that have used this railway that there's feelings of like unease and things that they just can't explain when they go there. But if we go back to the Old Boar Head, the Old Boar's Head, so the entities that were spoken about when people have been there and when people have recounted their stories of, being there, whether it be working there as a customer or whatnot, they have told stories about things like a sudden drop in temperature, which means that the paranormal spirit is present. People have felt their clothes being tugged at by these hands that, can't be seen. There's been stories about things, flying about in the, in the building, whether it be, just like an inanimate object that's just been, chucked, for example. And it's said to be tied to this this spirit called the Sad Cavalier. I think the real name for them was Edward. Again, I've only started looking into the history of, the area that I lived in relatively recently, so there is a lot more that I could look into. But what I might do is I might do a bit more of a comprehensive video where I've like researched into these things, such as the railway ghost, the Old Boar's Head. Maybe look at more areas within the Leeds area, since based on some experience I had as a kid, I could probably maybe get some helpful info about what actually fucking happened. Who knows? But yeah, I'll probably do that. But going back to the staring in the corner and then screaming. So I don't think it's much of a secret within the paranormal community that children are more likely to see things than adults are. So what my parents couldn't see at the time, maybe I was seeing, because children are more impressionable. So that's why I believe that kids see paranormal spirits way more than adults do, because if this is a spirit that doesn't want to be detected by people, then, if they do something, scare a kid or whatnot, then the parents are just going to be like, oh, he's just daydreaming, oh, he's just had a nightmare, or something like that. But there is also a theory as well that paranormal spirits like to attach themselves to younger people because they've got like so much of their physical life ahead of them. But yeah, so there's things about misinterpretation. So when we're younger, we're learning more and more about how the world actually works. So things like sudden drops in temperature, that random creaking on the floorboards, we're not directly linking that to anything when we're younger. We're not stood there trying to rationalize, oh, maybe it's just an old floorboard, or maybe the sudden drop in temperature. We're not rationalizing it as, oh, maybe your window's open or something. We're not doing that when we're kids, because we're a lot more impressionable at that time. Spirits are much more attached to people that have like more pure energy. When you're a kid, you're not dealing with things that adults deal with, such as stress and things like that, which then sort of makes an adult's energy a lot less pure and a lot less unattractive to a spirit that might want to attach themselves to somebody. There is this thing as well called the veil theory. So basically, when we're really young, our veil between the physical life and the afterlife is like really thin. But then as we get older, and like I said, we deal with these things such as stress, which makes us as we're dealing with things with stress, that makes us less attractive to the paranormal spirits, and we become more able to rationalize things that are happening that could be paranormal, but at the same time might not be. That veil between that veil that we have between the physical life and the afterlife, that becomes more and more thick. But then in looking into it, there are psychologists that then do go into the fact that kids have more active imaginations. Kids might conjure something up in their head that then they believe that they're seeing, but they're actually not. Which again, it just goes into the whole rationalizing. My theory about the whole paranormal subject is that spirits are more likely to present themselves to people that won't rationalize. Because I see spirits as having a lot of human traits from when they were actually human, in their physical forms. Say you were to be ignored by somebody, like you try talking to them, they ain't saying nothing back. They're literally treating you like you do not even exist. If that happens a lot, then our reaction is we're going to become upset about it. If it keeps happening, it could get to the point where we eventually lash out. Now, because spirits, they need to have a high amount of energy to make themselves, appear to people. When we hear these creaking floorboards, when we feel these drops in temperatures, if people are rationalizing it, they're essentially ignoring that spirit. Which, again, if it happens enough times to that particular spirit, that spirit could then lash out, which is where the whole malevolent spirits, I believe, come from. Which is why when I personally hear creaking floorboards, when I feel a sudden drop in temperature, when I feel that there is something here with me, I don't dismiss it. I remain open-minded to it, because it could be something, and I don't want to piss anyone off, I don't want to be responsible for a malevolent spirit being created. Yeah, basically I just wanted to summarize a couple of things that I had happen to me when I was younger. If people think it's bullshit, then, you're entitled to your opinion, because the thing is we don't have concrete evidence that has to be accepted. In order for people to be able to accept the fact that the paranormal exists, they need to experience something for themselves. Because if you think about it, the amount of videos that people see on the internet about a ghost sighting, and people will say, oh, that's been edited in, oh, that's CGI, oh, that's not a ghost, that might just be a fly flying across the camera or something. My objective here isn't to make people believe in the paranormal. All I'm doing here is just sharing things that I've experienced. If other people have experienced anything like this, it could create some sort of conversation, who knows. It could also tell people that have experienced these things that they're not alone. You know, a lot of people have experienced similar things, the same things, could be in the same areas. It could be, you know, thousands of miles away. You know, like I said, my objective here isn't to make people believe in the paranormal. You know, everyone's entitled to their opinion, and I'm going to be respectful of that. But yeah, so that's mainly like the childhood portion of things out of the way. Going forward, there's going to be things that I've experienced as I got older. So there was things like, you know, sleep paralysis, random knocking, being grabbed by something that wasn't there, and just situations where I felt like there is definitely something here with me. But yeah, I'll leave it there for today, and you'll see the other videos about the later experiences coming soon. But yeah, as always, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.